Hey guys, on today's episode, we have Vanessa Azelis. So Vanessa was actually on the show way back. It might have been like 3 or 4 years ago. And one of our most popular guests in terms of like the number of downloads and views we got. Personally really got on well with her. And she had an amazing story to share at the time. She's then come back on 2 years later, which I think this is what I need to do with all my guests, and has even crazier stories to tell. And I think this just goes to show the progression with chronic illness is not linear. Maybe for some it isn't, but for a lot of people, it is very up and down. And to get to where you need to get to, you have to go through some challenges, some dark periods, and Vanessa has definitely had those in her story. So without any further ado, we'll get into the episode. You're going to love this one. Let me know what you think. And yeah, let's get into it. Today, I am delighted. I think we've only had a couple of people back on the show, but we've got Vanessa Azelis. I got that. Yeah, cool. How are you doing, Vanessa?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be back and honored to be even asked to be back.
Yeah, no, definitely. I put out a story on Instagram, and your name came up a number of times, and I was like, yeah, let's definitely do it. We just spoke before. I think it was like literally 2 years ago that we last had, and I'm worried that I'm wearing the same top. So if someone's talking about YouTube and what, I think I'm wearing the same gym top. So what's really interesting is this is set up as a Q&A. So we've got some questions that I want to get into, but then we started talking and you saying that, since the last time we speak, you've had another perfect storm, which could be a whole episode in itself. So I guess let's see how we get on. Maybe we need to do another episode for the Q&A.
Yeah, sure.
So could you, just for those who don't know you and haven't watched the last episode, could you give a brief overview of the last time we spoke in terms of like that story, and then we'll go into the new story which we haven't spoken about. So I wouldn't say I'm excited to hear about, but I'm definitely interested.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm going to give you the cold notes version because it's quite long, but in 2009 I contracted a parasite on travel with work. I was a federal officer, so I was air marshaling people back home, and I had it for many months, didn't know I had it. And it was like a very intense one. It was 70% death rate once we found out what it was. It attacked the nervous system, my lungs, the digestive system. Every part of me was affected in some way. And so I kept running to the doctors. No one knew what it was. Back and forth from the hospital with breathing issues. Still no one knew. And then finally, they sent my blood work to the CDC, and they found this like rare parasite that I had. And I remember they called me. I was at work at the time, barely working, and they're like, "You need to come in now, and we have to start a chemotherapy treatment." And this was like right before my wedding. It was just a really intense time. I stopped working. I did the treatment. It was hard on me, hard on my liver, hard on all of just right before your wedding is not the ideal time to do that. But I got rid of it. Thankfully, it worked, but I never got better. And so, that's 2009. Flash forward the next 10 years of my life, things just kept getting worse, pretty much. I developed multiple chronic conditions, chronic fatigue syndrome, POTS syndrome. I had chronic dealing migraine, vestibular migraine, Meniere's disease, small fiber neuropathy, mast cell activation, like you name it, I had it. And, that just sent me on a search to find answers. And, I tried every doctor, holistic practitioner, energy worker, chiropractor, acupuncture, tincture. I mean, everything, right? Because you were so desperate at that time. And I think I just kept getting worse, and I had no answers at that point, just popping pills and doing what I can. I did have 2 kids during that time. By the grace of God, I don't know how I did it. Both pregnancies were intense. I had a lot of help though. So I had family, they raised my kids for me. I wasn't like a typical mom who did everything. And then in 2017, I crashed even more and I was hospitalized. I could not sit up without losing consciousness, could not eat. I had the gastroparesis. I needed round the clock care. And I was in the hospital for a good almost 2 months. And that's actually where I was officially diagnosed with POTS syndrome and dysautonomia. And honestly, we thought I was going to die. Like we thought it was done. We called my dad back from Greece because he was there on vacation and they weren't sure I was going to make it. And, I was kind of saying bye to my kids and my husband and my family, and just no one knew what was going on. They're like, well, what does she have? And, you're given this diagnosis, but, it wasn't just POTS, it was multiple things. So I was released in the care of my family after being put on 12 medications to support different functions of my body. And then I was basically on bed rest, living with my parents, 33 years old, back home, moved in with my kids so they could care for them. And then I think I shared this a bit about how my faith comes into play, but I was so desperate that I wanted to take my life. I was done. I could not live in this world anymore or suffer like this. And my parents begged me to come to church and just let the priest pray over me. And I wasn't a very faithful person. I was really angry at God at that point. They brought me to the church. I remember that day. They carried me there, placed me on the altar, and this priest I had never met just started praying. And so it was my mom, my dad, and this priest. And they were crying. My mom was crying. The priest was getting emotional. And I just surrendered. I was like, I'm done. I can't do anything else. God, I'm done. And something happened that day. And it wasn't a miraculous healing or anything. It was just this pinhole of hope and light. And within a week, I found a brain retraining program, DNRS, which kind of popped up to me 6 months before, but I had never taken it seriously. And that's where I was like, okay, this is God. I think he's guiding me to do this. And so I did it. And I started to improve, and I started retraining my brain, rewiring it. I started to calm that stress response. I started to get function back. I started to get off medication. And, that led me to other things like somatics and, EFT tapping, belief work. And then that kind of brought me to where I met you, pretty much. We had our last conversation where I was kind of just starting off coaching and guiding others on their journey. And yeah, and that's I guess where it was last time we spoke.
I that was like hearing it for the first time again a little bit. Like it's almost like, when you watched a movie like 5 years ago and then you watch it again, but you kind of remember it and it's like and you're like, oh yeah, I do.
Yeah.
That was a very strange experience, but and I forgot about the deadly 70%. I mean, I definitely forgot the 70% death rate. That's crazy. But yeah, oh my God. Well, thank you for going through that. And yeah, I guess I'd set this call up thinking that it was all around, we could do a Q&A, but it sounds like there's a part two, a sequel to this. That you can talk about. So yeah, please could you go on to that?
Yeah, sure. So last time we spoke, I had just moved into our dream home. Had this thriving business, coaching, and things were going well. I even went back to my old job, so I was kind of, doing two things at once. And I mean, the full pandemic happened. And in 2021 of November, I got the virus, and I got the Delta variant, which was pretty brutal. My whole family got it, and within 2 weeks, my father passed from it. And he was like young, healthy, 62 years old. And I know I've shared a lot about my dad in the past. We were like super close. He was there for every doctor's appointment with me, every visit. He was my anchor. I don't think I would have made it this far if it wasn't for him. And there's just a sudden loss. Like he just was suddenly not there. And at the same time, I was also in the hospital with pericarditis. double lung infection, all the symptoms of, through dysregulation, right? From this massive trauma in my life that was so unexpected that I wasn't prepared for. And so I suddenly found myself, December 2021, diagnosed with long COVID, suddenly, without my number one support of my life. My husband lost his job, so he was out of work. And it was this just immense perfect storm. And I mean, I had lost people before, like grandparents and relatives, but never someone so close. And so it rocked my world. And I may not have shared, but I have a background in grief as a bereavement educator. And so I studied this for some weird reason, was fascinated by it and the whole experience of it. And suddenly I was living in it and felt so unprepared. I was completely unprepared for what life had just thrown at me. How could I now be back in a bed again? And so it was intense. And a part of me knew that I had the resources and tools. But at the same time, I'm like, well, this isn't an overreaction from my limbic system. This is real. My dad died. So it was like trying to find this way to honor grief while also tapping into regulation, which is freaking hard. And so, I mean, at first I didn't do anything. I just gave myself, that time, and I couldn't brain retrain away grief. I couldn't brain retrain a new reality away because it was happening. I couldn't bring my dad back. But what could I do? And so I started not from square one. I would say this was a new way to approach healing, a new way to relate to this journey. And I started to just connect to my body more. I started doing somatic work, the most gentlest thing. I started to slowly, incrementally train with movement again. I started to build up my nervous system. And I think what was pivotal was I kept sending these signals of safety to myself in some way. And that looked like talking to my inner child a lot. It took a lot of compassion and grace. And, slowly but surely I started to recover. I mean, I knew I didn't have quote unquote like long COVID. I knew this was dysregulation that, came as a result of immense trauma to the body on multiple levels.
Mm.
And so I've been working, on healing grief since then. Not healing grief, but moving with grief, I want to say, because you can't really heal it. It's with you for life in some way. But yeah, it was another perfect storm that I didn't expect. And the reason I share this is to just be, transparent and authentic in my journey to say that, yes, we can heal from chronic illness and live an abundant life, but life can still happen on the other side of that. And it's not all butterflies and rainbows. Real stuff does happen. But what I will say is that had I not been through this journey, I mean, I would still be in bed with long COVID. I would not be around. Like, I was able to bounce back from that, recover, because I knew what it was. I was able to support my nervous system and come back into some sense of safety again. And that is like the encouraging part to share, is like the stuff that you learn on this journey, the resources that you collect are with you for life, for life. And, healing is always happening in some way, right? If we look around us, the world is always changing. And so we can't expect ourselves to stay the same. We're also healing, right? And as for the grief perspective, I also found like a really big gap in this community. Like, no one was talking about grief. And yet there was so much grief, not just with the loss of our people, but like, think about the grief of losing 10 years of my life, or not remembering my kids growing up, or losing that job, or the life that could have been, right? So many layers to it, and yet no one was talking about it. And it took me being in deep depths of grief with my dad to recognize that there was even a deeper grief. Like there were so many layers to it, and no one was talking about it here. And I find that the grief itself is healing. We can still heal while we're grieving, and it's part of the healing process. And so that's kind of why, now these days I share a lot about grief, and I'm sharing resources for that because, we all experience it in some way. But to bring it full circle, I had another perfect storm, and it like was incredibly hard, and it still is in some ways, but I was able to use what I learned to support myself through it. And that is the gift here, is saying like, whatever happens after this, I'm going to be okay. Right?
So, first of all, wow, that's like crazy to have gone through that, and in such a intense period of time as well, by the sound of things, to have gone through that, be where you're at now. Also, thank you for, you summarized it beautifully as well, without with leaving us enough time to do the cue, to do some questions. Yeah. What's really loads of stuff resonated with me there, and I'll try and touch upon a few of the things. I went through my own, so I like really put myself out there last year of like saying, I've really made a lot of progression. And as soon as I did it, I was like, oh God, I'm worried now, because then everyone's going to be like, oh, you've recovered. Like, how do I do that? And it's like, oh shit, no, I haven't recovered, but like, I'm doing better. And then this year this has been a really stressful year, and I've been off the podcast, and I had a really, quite recently, like really kind of bad time of it. And when I was in it, it was difficult at times to remind myself of the progression I'd made. However, I was eventually able to draw on that experience and on that strength as well that I got from before. And it's almost like I don't know, an example of, just, the 4-minute mile thing. When there's an example of like someone doing it, or yourself better, you do that and you're like, okay, my edge is that far. I can push, maybe push isn't the right word, but I can do this. I can go through this. And I haven't talked about it either, but I went in recently. I went in an ayahuasca retreat, and I'd done one before, but this one was a different experience. And there's a lot I need to talk about on that. But what was really interesting about that retreat was that you meet everyone's got smiles on their faces. You think everyone's kind of just, normal. I'm the only one with going through some stuff. And then everyone goes and shares their story. And it's interesting you say grief, because most people who shared a story had some form of grief. And I always think of grief as, oh, someone's died. So I've been quite lucky because I've got a small family and had that many people die, apart from like elderly. But then you're right, thinking of stuff like losing my years of my life, losing other things. And there was a girl in there who'd been sexually assaulted. Like she had, grief, lost that part of her that she can't get back. That's grief as well. And so, it's really interesting that you're right. I before you'd said it like that, I think people just think, oh, well, someone close to me hasn't died, therefore I don't have grief. And that's really interesting that you've said that. So when you're working with people now, and is that one of the first things you'll go to?
I wouldn't say it's a first. I feel when I work with people, I meet them where they're at, and most of the time they come to me really dysregulated, and maybe they've done a bunch of programs and they're struggling. And so as I work with them on cultivating a sense of safety, I notice as they start improving, the grief surfaces. So the grief, it's almost like it won't come up until you have the capacity for it. And that's what I see, because, let's think of yourself in the most dysregulated or unsafe place. we don't have the capacity for even more heavy emotions. So our brain will protect us from it. And it serves a purpose. But there comes a time where I notice, and I've seen this pattern in almost everyone I work with, where they come to this place of grief and it kind of hits them and they're like, what is this? And they see it as a dip or a crash or like they're going backward. And I'm there to remind them and say, no, this is grief surfacing. We need to give it space. We need to sit with it. And if we open our hearts to it, we have more capacity for it. But it's almost in a titrated way. So I kind of guide them to say, like, okay, let's gently connect to that grief. What does that look like? How can we support our bodies through that? And I'll also add that, David Kessler, he's one of the biggest like grief experts out there. And he said something in a podcast and once that really stuck with me. And he said, not all grief is traumatic, but all trauma has grief. So think about that for a second. If you've been on this journey of chronic illness, there is trauma, but guaranteed there is some trauma, whether it's big T, little t. So in that trauma is a loss of something. Maybe it's the loss of an expectation, the loss of a dream, the loss of a relationship, the loss of an ability, the loss of hope. Whatever it is, there is loss. And that's really what grief is. It's loss. And so that stuck with me. I'm like, he's right. And so as I've been learning more about my grief, I'm also processing grief from years before that's coming up. And it's such a process of unfolding and transforming, really. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, 100%. No, definitely did. I want to dive in because I've got loads of questions that I could ask you, and I want to ask you, but I would like to ask some of the questions that because interesting people have asked about grief as well. So maybe we'll go and have a look at a few of those. So someone said, did you have any coaches or guides on your journey? So definitely sounds, you've already mentioned a couple. I guess who have been your biggest guides that have helped you?
Yeah, so I worked with a coach earlier on in my journey. I tried some DNRS coaches, but they never really stuck. It was like periodic. And then I worked with this one woman, Tiffany Spencer, and she was just such a really kind and compassionate person that held space for me. And honestly, I think some of the time, the coach, we're expecting them to heal us or fix us, but really the biggest gift they can give to us is like seeing us in our pain, witnessing it, and then just being there to support us. And that makes all the difference. And as I made this community in general, I made incredible friends that I talk to daily still for like years. And we also supported each other. Right. And so that was motivating and encouraging as well. Just knowing like, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah, definitely. And can I just say, I like the fact that you reference the specific people and coaches and programs and stuff. I think, I don't want to bash other people, but I have had other people on that maybe don't want to conceal that they did recover with DNRS because they're selling their own kind of thing. And like that's, I think it's really, really important that everyone knows those things. So I'm glad you referenced the actual people.
Yeah, this is a big space and there's enough space for all of us. That's what I say. Right?
Exactly. Abundant mentality. I like it. So for someone disabled with a chronic illness, where do they start to heal?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if that person's in a program or any of them, but I would say that a program would be really beneficial because that education component is key. And if you can't afford a program, there's so many great resources out there as well. People post videos all the time, but that education component, whether you're listening to Dan Buglio and his TMS stuff, or just following like, Jen Mann from CFS School on Instagram. There's some free resources, but I always say that a program is really that first step. So it can give you the beginning to end kind of idea as to this dysregulation, because we want to solidify that concept and belief in our brain that there's nothing wrong with us. We're not broken, that it is really this dysregulation at the core. And borrowing belief from others, watching podcasts like yours, where you can see other people's recovery stories and just maybe start with a what if. Well, what if that can be me? What if I can heal? What if I'm not too far gone? Right. And so starting there, just showing up in some way every day. That is like my slogan to all my clients. Show up in some way every day. You're not going to regret it.
I love that, reframing that what if, because that what if normally used to be for me a lot of like, what if I, can't walk again? What if I can't do all of
Exactly.
that? And actually reframing that. I'm trying to do a lot of that. I work with a breathwork practitioner out here, and she's got me thinking about the fact that I say I need and I should a lot,
Mhm.
and I've stopped myself. And okay, no, that's a decision I don't need. I would like, and it's so interesting when you look at the different nuances of your language, and a what if is very interesting. What if
Hmm.
every time you think what if in a negative way, you do it,
Yeah,
flip it and think it in a positive way.
exactly.
Love it, love it. So can we use grief as a way to deeper connect to ourselves? If so, how?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on this a little earlier, just saying that I think the grieving process within the healing process is important. Not saying that it's a prerequisite and you have to do this grief work, but I'm inviting you to say to be open to hold space for that grief as it surfaces, because that's going to teach you a lot. And if you think of it this way, and when we're holding on to our past so tightly, how are we able to move forward? Right? If we're able to grieve with awareness, what we have lost, then we're more likely to let that go and be able to start fresh, start new, right? This like new creation or new experience that we're having. And it can teach you a lot about yourself. I know for myself, grief, really changed the way I see things. The things that didn't matter back then matter more now, and things that matter then don't really matter now. And so it paints a different picture of the world for you. And I feel like it opens you up to an even more, I guess, a stronger experience of love for what you do have and appreciation. And, our struggles can be the seat of absolute transformation if we allow it, right? So yeah, I think it does teach us a lot about ourselves, and really does help us to grow and change in some way.
I love that. Like, what did you say? Our struggles can be.
Yeah, so I believe it was David Kessler who said this as well. Our struggles can be the seat of our transformation,
Yeah.
right?
I couldn't. I mean, I'm forever thinking that about my health, but I'm trying to. Sorry, I'm making this about me, but it's a moment I'm trying to relate what you're saying now to. I'm going through a very difficult time with our business at the moment, but I'm never learning. I've never learned so much about
Exactly.
myself and my business as I have the last 2 months compared to this a year ago when it was relatively easy and I was just kind of coasting. And
Yeah.
I've learned so much, and also you can apply that to the chronic health stuff. Like the amount I know about myself now from a health perspective compared to when I was in my 20s, just like it's night and day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'll even add to that, just in general, if you think about life, life is a series of expansions and contractions. We can't be always expanding. Think about that. Constantly growing, So there has to be this contraction that comes. And so what you're describing to me, which I've experienced in my growth with my business as well, is like we get outside of our comfort zones. We're growing, we're expanding, we're learning. And there sometimes are these periods of contraction. And whereas in the past, we would have looked at them like, oh, this is a crash or a dip. Well, what if this is a contraction so that I can gather my energy or recalibrate or process these changes so that I can then expand again? And so that's kind of how I like to look at it, instead of like, I'm crashing because I did too much. I'm like, whoa, I expanded and now I need to contract. And there's purpose to both movements.
Yeah, no, for sure. I always I remember someone who was saying to me, I think I've said it a few times on the podcast. There's like cycles just in everything. There's a cycle going on in this hour and this minute, in this day, in this month, and you're either toward the bottom end of the cycle or the top end of the cycle. I'm always saying to myself, like, I'm just getting toward the bottom end of the cycle. Like this, that's what's
Yeah,
going on. That, I will be back towards that top end.
exactly.
And you see it within like the financial markets as an example. And when it's bad, everyone, this post-COVID time now where people are like, inflation's never been worse. Like this is
Yeah.
it's never been this bad. And then I watch these documentaries like that were over the decades. And there's something every decade where it's like everything's at an all-time high, and employment's at an all-time high. It just has to happen like that. And so trying to talk yourself through that those times have to come so the good times can arrive.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a purpose to all those seasons. Yeah, I love that.
Definitely. So what's the biggest lesson you've learned on this journey? That might be difficult to just watch.
I think I might have even already said it or touched on it. Is this okay? So I know we talked before we started a little bit about this false ideal that a lot of people are selling, that nothing, ever happened after healing, or that there's this like beginning and end kind of story to our lives where only the bad stuff happens, like right here between these two lines. And that's just not life, right? Like, we're humans, and if you're a human on this planet, stuff is going to happen. And what I've kind of learned this lesson is that until I breathe my final breath, I'm healing in some way, and not in a bad way. Not to say I'm sick and I have to heal this and this, but I see healing as changing and growing and transforming. And the biggest lesson out of that idea is that I am now more prepared and more resourced, I guess is a better word, than ever before, because I have access to these resources, this knowledge, this capacity, and I know how to move through something. And like that, I would say, has been the biggest lesson is life will always happen, but I'm going to be okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, you summarized that perfectly. A couple of questions here that actually I'm really interested in. Can the nervous system still produce symptoms in a regulated state? I wake up from symptoms. I'm having a bit of this issue at the moment, actually, that I'm kind of waking up in the night with kind of symptoms. What would you say to that?
So, it's my first, response to that is, if you're waking up with symptoms, there's a part of you that's not feeling safe.
Yeah.
So there is this alarm kind of going off. And I'm not going to say that you're, so you're totally dysregulated and this is what's happening. But maybe there's something going on at that time that's putting you in a more heightened state of activation. And there's maybe a part of you that is unable to fully rest. There could be things going on, like you said, life has been really busy. You're growing in your business and you're feeling that. It's not a failure in any sense, but what part of you is asking for your attention, and how can you tend that part? How can you tend to your nervous system a little more to maybe cushion a little bit of this stress that's going on? That's kind of how I would approach it. It's not, I don't like saying you're dysregulated or you're regulated. I think we fluctuate between those, these states of activation throughout our lives and even throughout our days sometimes. And so that for me is just an invitation to kind of check in and saying like, okay, where can I support myself a little more? What can I let go of right now?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a constant kind of push and pull between, because you've got to live your life and then also take care of yourself. It's such a fine balance, because you even said it earlier when you got back after we last spoke. You were like, oh well, I've got a business, I'll take my old job back now.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's because, but also you want to, but we also talked about, I think before, around it's not safe to like constantly push yourself, but then also it's not safe to wrap yourself in cotton wool and not challenge yourself, because both sides you're going to break yourself kind of
Yeah.
it's better to be in the middle as much as you can.
Yeah. And I think I'll touch on that too, because I see that where people are like, oh, do I push? How do I train? Or do I stay in kind of the safety bubble or the parameter that is set? And for myself, I think when people kind of ask me, hey, I'm going back to work, or I'm going and doing this, or life is getting busier and I don't have as much time to do my practice, I say, well, how can you weave little bits of safety and regulation into your day? What if it's like the 2 minutes of breathing here and like a vagus nerve exercise there? And is there time for intentional recovery? This is the key for me, for myself, and all the people I work with, is being intentional about your recovery time. So say you're expanding your window. Are you making time for intentional recovery, which would mean giving yourself or your body, your mind body system, an opportunity to discharge any activation, and to come back into regulation? It might be a somatic exercise. It might be breath work. It might be, whatever practice that you're doing around, or something like that. And so that's been the key, and that's the defining factor as to whether you are kind of growing your window, right? Is like, I'm pushing myself outside my window, but I need to kind of contract, recover, release, and then expand again. And so, that's kind of how I approach that.
Do you think, 'cause I applied, so for 5 years, maybe I think it was, I wasn't properly exercising, and it was because each time I'd feel like a little bit better, I'd go in and I'd try and do an exercise, and something bad had happened with me, and I'd be like, I'd go in, it would go badly, I'd retract and like not do anything for ages. But I was going in with such fear around what would happen that was that now I realized that was the main cause of it. And then how I got myself to where I am now is that I worked with this trainer who, on days where I was like, I really don't feel like I can push it, he would kind of like say, you're fine, you can do it, or we'll take a step back and we'll take a step sideways. And it was like, it was getting this thing in my mind that what's the worst that can happen? It's not actually as bad as you think. And weirdly, the most progression I made with him, because I used to see him in person, was when I went back to the UK and we had to work remotely. And I was like, oh no, I'm not going to have him like in person with me. How am I going to feel safe? And actually, I learned to trust myself, as cheesy as that sounds.
Yes.
And that was when I made the real progression, because I didn't, at the beginning, I had the kind of, the training wheels on with him, and when they were taken off, when it was with me, and that was when I gained the true confidence. I don't know if that.
Yeah, it does totally. I mean, even for myself, when I went on vacation, to Greece this summer, and my clients were like, what are we going to do without you? And I'm like, you got everything you need. And it was the opportunity for them to realize that. And so we don't really know until we're kind of put in that situation. And it sounds like you had built enough confidence in yourself. A part of you was listening to all the messages your trainer was saying.
Yeah.
Right. And then that part showed up.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure. For sure. Well, I just think I had enough evidence. Also, think there's, I don't know whether you agree with this. I tried to have some, maybe it shouldn't be phrased like this, but like, it can't get much worse, or like what am I really risking here?
Yeah.
And going, I was already not able to work out, why don't I just try and see what happens? And yeah, I might get let down, but just to keep going. Just moving on to the next one. There's someone's asked a question, and it's kind of, I have a question alongside that. What did you take for parasites that you had alongside the brain retraining? And I just wanted to ask you with this, because I'm interested actually. For a long time now, I've just stopped all treatments, all supplements, because they were driving me crazy, and I was just like, perfectionism. I need to do all of this. I was spending thousands of dollars, and I just noticed I didn't feel worse or better for not doing them. So I was like, well, I might as well have $1,000 a month in my pocket. now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, maybe I do need to have a look at what's going on physically, because whatever happens, if I drink this Balinese water every single day, I'm going to get really sick. And that's like a physical thing, right? And there is nervous
Yeah.
system, but so touching upon what this person asked, how much would you say to someone to still try and address the physical stuff as well as doing the nervous system stuff?
Okay. So I'll touch on the first part first and say that, when I initially had the parasite or suspected, I did go like the naturopath route initially, and tried many tinctures and vitamins and detox, and my nervous system could not handle it. So I stopped. I did end up doing, like I said, the chemotherapy route for that particular uh, parasite because it was, that deadly and I had to, which was a lot on my nervous system. But after that, I never addressed it again. And partly because I didn't have the capacity within me to to do any more like detoxes or any more of that medication or whatever they were giving me. Um, and I was like you on a ton of vitamin and supplement, but they weren't specific for the parasite. But like I was doing celery juice and other things from medical medium at one point as well, but not while I'm retraining. Once I started brain retraining, I knew my body couldn't handle these extreme things. I just knew every elimination diet did, every, you know, really strict type of way of eating also played on like past history with bulimia and anorexia, and which brought up more trauma. And so for me, it was like, constant signals of danger, danger, danger. You can't eat this. So all these restrictive diets made me worse. And like you said, with the vitamin, I saw it different. And so I pretty much stopped, maybe not all of them. I think I was still taking like magnesium and a couple of the other, like iron. My iron had been low at that point. And so while I was retraining, I was not really taking much. I was not doing the diets. I went back to more of a balanced way of eating, which is like my Mediterranean diet. And like that's kind of how I dealt with it. And then what was your question was
Well, it's just I know that stuff like heavy metals and
right. Okay. Yes.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always tell my clients you have to have a pretty firm foundation and regulation in order to even attempt any of these. Because I mean, when you're taking binders and you're doing all of these type of things, it can be a lot on your nervous system. So I always say start with the nervous system work. But if you come to a place where you're pretty confident in your regulation, I would approach it as, because I'm not black and white. I think that I see everything as support. And so if we're not looking at it and approaching it through fear, meaning I have to go to this naturopath or this functional medicine doctor so they can find this and fix me. So that's one story versus the story of I'm regulating my nervous system and everything's coming back into balance and I might need a little support and that's okay. Right. And so it's like, how are you approaching it? Is this out of fear to say they haven't found something like this is what's happening? Or is it out of support to say like, oh, I think I'm going to ask for some support, knowing that regulating my nervous system gives my body, optimal ability to detox and heal. But sometimes we need a little support along the way. So that's kind of how I approach it is like, what is the story you're telling yourself?
Totally. Yeah. I actually, so I've started doing, have you heard of like morning pages before?
Oh,
It's like a practice. I found out about it a few months ago, and then I did ayahuasca, and I was like, okay, I need to force myself. There's just stop. So I need to do. I want to do this because I don't journal really, and I know it's good for me. It's like a practice where you write for 3 pages, but you don't think about it, and you just
mhm.
when it comes out, and you just
Yeah.
can't stop until you finish. And something I said the other day was like, it is interesting me wanting to go down this kind of route of like looking at heavy metals and stuff like that is more out of optimization, as opposed to that's the thing that's going to fix me and solve me.
Exactly.
And I actually know that those things won't solve me unless I'm doing all of the other
Mhm.
stuff well. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah, I
that's
totally
good. No, 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 that's a positive way to look at it.
cool. Someone has asked, would love some tips how to manage periods of increasing activity, for example, getting back to work.
Yeah. So I touched on this as well as we're going back and getting our lives back, we need to, or we need, it'd be best to weave in some of that regulation throughout the day. And so I don't want people to be seeing this as like, I have to do a practice for the rest of my life and I have to do all these exercises forever. No, the way I see it is these are ways to show your self-love. There's self-love, there's self-care, and they're just ways to support yourself. So if you're waking up and like brushing your teeth every day or going to the gym, we need to give that same attention to our nervous system. So not just pay attention to it when it's like freaking the fuck out and saying like, hey, listen to me, but checking in. So as you're going to work, throughout the day, I have many clients who are working. Take those pauses, like 2 minutes of the VU breath, noticing how your chair is supporting you, right? Just leaning back and noticing a contact point. Like a quick vagus nerve exercise with your eyes, just noticing breathing. So these are all just ways to kind of connect throughout your day. And then I have some clients who will do like, a visualization on the way to work in the car or on a train. And that intentional recovery that I mentioned earlier is key here is like, okay, you have this day of work, you maybe weave in a little love for your nervous system, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. It doesn't have to take your whole day. When you get home, whether it's after you get from work or go to bed before like bed at night, how can you release some of that activation energy throughout your day? Whatever it is that you picked up at home, how can we let go of some of it and send that message of safety to our survival brain? So that's kind of how I approach things and have been approaching it.
Love it. I've got a question here, and they sent this to you actually, and it's a great question. And I think whoever has asked this question, they need to know that I think this is what everyone thinks when they're going through chronic illness. And so it took me a long time to truly believe I could heal, 2 years. And now that I do strongly believe, my brain is telling me, okay, you can, but it will take until you're 70. It's like I've replaced one horrible scenario with another fear. Yes, it feels like nothing is changing. I think maybe yet it feels like nothing's changing. I'm working on my brain, emotions, and behavior, and I'm changing as a human, but the proof isn't there yet. Can you speak to the time
Yes,
encapsulate?
you can. I'm not an overnight story. It took me years, right? And I think the majority of people I see are in that same boat. I still have yet to meet someone who has a 6 month period where there's like, I started this and in 6 months, this is what happened. So we know that, I mean, it took us years to get to this place of sickness or dis-ease, dysregulation, whatever you want to call it. And those neural pathways are strong. And what's interesting about rewiring your brain and what is true about it is that we don't see the changes in our physical body immediately. All change starts in the brain and it trickles out. And so when I see those signs, like when I tell, my clients are like, oh, I still have these symptoms, but I'm responding differently. I'm seeing things differently. I'm reacting a little different. It starts with dismantling that fear from the symptom, right? And so that's where the magic happens. And so if you're not seeing it yet, like think of the example of planting a seed. We're not going to plant it, dig it up to see if it's growing. We're going to trust that it's growing. And so for this person, again, the seeds have been planting. She's showing up. She's doing the work. And those neuroplastic changes are going to show up. It's only a matter of time. The brain has to change if you're doing it from this perspective. But again, the changes start here first. So focus on those changes, right? Even if you can't see it in your physical body first, focus on maybe I smiled a little more today. Maybe I reacted differently to this. Maybe I felt more focused today. And then kind of pivot from there. And obviously the borrowing belief that we talk about is just look at all those who came before you. It might be taking long. I don't have the answer as to why it's taking long. It does for some of us. But I'm telling you, no one has ever regretted showing up and doing the work. A lot of people have regretted stopping it, and a lot of people have regretted not starting in the first place. But I've never met anyone who regretted holding on and believing that, hey, it could be right around the corner. You
Yeah.
know, it's there for us. So I know it's hard though. I totally get the frustration.
Yeah, and whoever asked that question, who is probably representative of 99% of people listening, and they've showed in their question that they've made progression. They didn't
Exactly.
think they could heal, or now they do. So it's like it's showing. It's like the analogy I give is like it's like going to the equivalent of like being out of shape, going to the gym, and then looking at yourself in the mirror, expecting yourself to look ripped or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
straight away.
Exactly.
And it's never going to happen. That's why people do these, 2-year side by side photos, because you don't notice the day to day and
Sure.
incremental changes. And so, yeah, I think the very fact that that person has belief has changed, they're undoing a hell of a lot of like stuff that's been sitting there for years. So it's not just going to happen like overnight.
Exactly.
Yeah. I yeah, one more question, but it's kind of like a combination of questions. But essentially kind of how do you balance everything you've got going on? Do you get triggered? How do you deal with that? Because you've got your coach, your family, your own
Yeah.
health.
Yeah. It's not science. I mean, I feel like I'm still learning and trying to figure that out as I grow. I am, again, I still practice nervous system love. That's what I call it, like self-care daily in some way. And that looks like just, pockets of recovery and in between clients. Like I listen to some pretty heavy stories a lot of the time, just like, I'm sure you can understand that. And so I just make time for myself kind of in between sessions if I need to, grounding, like little things like that. But, I'll also say that triggers, that's a big one because a lot of people reach out to me and saying, I want to coach, I want to do this work. And I'm like, okay, it's not for the faint of heart. And you need to know that as you work with people, you're going to be triggered. And so when I first started working one on one, I got triggered a lot. And it was because I was seeing myself in people telling me their stories, like I had those symptoms or whatever it might be. And what I ended up doing with it is I saw this as a mirror reflecting back to me the wounds that I had yet to heal. And so I remember like taking a sticky note and like writing that down in a session and saying, okay, I need to work on this. And what it did, it brought things to the surface that I didn't really even realize that were still bothering me. And I used it as an opportunity to work through that. And I've healed alongside helping others as well. And, that was pretty wild. But again, it's just being mindful and intentional about myself, knowing that I don't want to go back to these old patterns where I was pushing, nonstop working and feeling unhappy and not prioritizing myself. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how it's looked. I mean, I'm still learning, right? I don't have it all figured out, and I don't think anybody does. And if they tell you they do, they're lying. So
Um, wh- uh, just quickly, when you were in the thick of healing, were you off your like social media?
yeah, no, I wasn't. I never fully went off. But I was very conscious to kind of, what was I consuming? Who was I following? I really needed it to be in alignment with, the brain retraining and, yeah, so it's very selective, but I found that the community was helpful for me in reinforcing this belief that I was healing and that it was possible.
Yeah, perfect. Someone's asked about the role of nutrition in your healing, but I think you kind of touched upon it earlier.
Mhm.
For me, that's been super beneficial. Of like, obviously, I don't want to go and eat cakes and drink vodka every day, but if I have like a balanced view on it, an 80-20, 90-10 kind of rule, is that how you apply it?
Yeah, I'm very balanced. I kind of just eat how my family eats. I'm Greek, so we eat oil and olive oil, and we do eat French fries, and we eat souvlaki and all of the good stuff. And I do like chips. I like chocolate. And so I don't eat them every single day, but I don't have fear around eating them anymore. right? And so I see it as like a treat, and it's a choice. It's always a choice.
Yeah, perfect. And thank you so much for coming up, not only sharing your first story, but then your second story, and then answering all these questions. I think, yeah, we'll need to do like an episode every 2 years or something, and kind of both give our updates of those 2 years, and hopefully I'll have bought a new T-shirt by then. If people, if people want to reach out to you, ask any questions or anything, can they do that? If so, what's the best way?
Yeah, for sure. I'm on Instagram, and you can find my website. I actually have a nervous system regulation membership out as well. It's not a program, guys. It's just a companion, like having me as your coach in your pocket, pretty much. And you can go to yourgratefulguide.com, find me there, on Instagram as Your Grateful Guide, and YouTube, all those places. And yeah, I'm still working one-on-one with people, but doing more kind of group things along with my members of Haven, my membership. And yeah, it's pretty much what it's looking like now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing that. And yeah, it's nice. I forgot to, you kind of forgot that COVID even happened now, isn't it? It's interesting that when we last spoke, it was like in the thick.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
God, crazy.
So much has changed.
Yeah. Look, thank you so much for coming on, and yeah, excited to get this episode out there.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me. It was good to see you, Phil.